welcome everybody. Thanks for being here this evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover tonight and an amazing rock star panel here made up of folks who have been a part of the fundraising philanthropy working group. What do you call yourselves?
The Philanthropy Working Group.
The Philanthropy Working Group.
We got that creative with the name.
Animal Support Services Project. So thank you so much for being here this evening. Especially thank you to our panelists. Tonight, our webinar, "'Tis the Season to Fundraise, How to Build Your Village of Support." I will kick it over to Brian Daugherty, who's the Chief Philanthropy and Communications Officer for San Diego Humane Society. Before I kick it over to you, though, Brian, I just want to mention to folks, if you have questions, we will have time for questions at the end. If we don't get to all of your questions, we will do our best to reach out after tonight's webinar and respond to you with questions. The easiest way to make sure that that will happen is if you use the QA function. So if you see down on your little scroll bar, there's a little QA with some chat bubbles there. So if you do have a question, go ahead and use that. Otherwise, use the chat for comments and we will get started. Thank you so much again to our panelists for being here. I'm really excited for this and I'll pass it over to you, Brian.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rory. I would say thank you to you. Thank you to everybody for joining. I do just want to show a little bit of local knowledge to Mona, who's joining us from Columbia, Maryland, and note that perhaps Mona could end this presentation and go to a show at Meriwether Post Pavilion. And that's just a little bit of local knowledge I'm going to drop out there for some folks. With that said, we have a star-studded cast of characters that have joined us on this call today who have been part of the Philanthropy Working Group. I'm going to just quickly have us run through that. So I'm going to pass this over to Ashlee Droscher, and Ashlee can introduce herself quickly.
Good evening, Ashlee Droscher. I'm the Development Director at the Animal Welfare League of Alexandria, and that is just outside of Washington, D.C. Pamela, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Ashlee. Pam Hogan from Riverside County Department of Animal Services. We are east of Los Angeles, north of San Diego, and I'm the Resource Development Coordinator. Very glad to be here.
Hi, and my name is Stephanie Wells, and I am the Director of Development for Michelson Found Animals. Brian?
Fantastic.
And I'm sorry that I didn't introduce Stephanie. That was my part.
That's all right. We're going to do a lot of improv here tonight. So one of the things in recognizing what we're going to go through tonight is everyone that just introduced themselves played an integral part in pulling all of this together. I'm going to do most of the driving on tonight's presentation, but certainly appreciate the support and work that everybody put into helping to make this happen. I certainly want to recognize anybody who is logging in from the East Coast because I recognize it's a little bit later. We bumped this because of some conflicts and some other scheduling. So you all get extra points, bonus points for being a part of this. And in starting any presentation on philanthropy, it seems only fitting to say thank you, because that's really a big part of what we do. It's a big part of what allows us to do more of what we do. So often people think all that we do is ask for money, and we're going to debunk that myth throughout the course of this presentation. But I certainly want to thank the folks at the Human Animal Support Services team, all of the funders who are supporting this, for really helping to pull a lot of people together to help change the way that animal sheltering is done now and into the future. It's a big task. There's a lot of work to do, and it's not going to happen if we don't raise more money to make that change. So that's a part of what we're going to talk about here today. We really started this with an understanding that building philanthropic capacity is one of the most centrally important aspects in animal welfare today. It is what allows us to drive and build our programs. And we're going to share a couple of tricks and tips on that as we move through this. One of the things that I want to note is as we looked at how to share information out through Philanthropy Week, we didn't want to come into a presentation on, well, this is how you should do direct mail. This is how you can do online giving. What we're talking about today is really about a culture of philanthropy. It's a bigger picture ticket than that, about how to get your entire organization on board and supportive and engaged with what your team is doing in philanthropy. And whether that team is one person, 20 people, 30 people, whatever the size is, I want to be clear, because some of us work at bigger shelters, some of us work at smaller shelters, whether you're in a rural area, whether you're urban, big shelter, small shelter, municipal contracts, no municipal contracts. What we're talking about today can be scaled and can be implemented in ways that all of us can work with. So as we think about this and move through today's presentation, we've covered that. We are in the midst of Philanthropy Week here. We've got a couple of takeaways that I want you to have. Number one, we talked about, or I already sort of referenced this, but we're hitting this with an assumption that philanthropy is one of the key drivers in what's changing the world. So whether it's working on hunger, homelessness, access to water, education, cure for cancer, whatever it is, philanthropy is one of the things that's going to drive the change that we want in the world. It certainly is in animal welfare. Animal welfare today is vastly different than it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. That change was driven because there were some extraordinary contributions that were made to organizations that were able to make that change. So we have a couple of other assumptions that we have in entering into our conversation today. And when we think about creating a culture of philanthropy, this is about expanding everyone's involvement and engagement with philanthropy beyond those that are fundraisers. So we didn't ask in this question, who on this call works directly in fundraising, who works in operations, who's a chief executive officer, executive director, whatever it might be. But no matter what, most of our other folks who aren't directly involved in what we do, and even some fundraisers, are actually afraid of fundraising. People are afraid of it because they think that we're asking people for money. We're going to talk about that. I think we need to acknowledge it. We need to be clear in saying that most of the folks who came to work at animal shelters didn't come there because they said, you know what I want to do? Ask people for money. They didn't do it for that. They came because they want to make a difference for animals. We need to help educate them and make the connection. So I also take this assumption, as our whole team does, that most folks throughout our organization don't fully understand what our philanthropy team does. Whether, again, that team is 1 person or 100 is irrelevant. Most people don't have a true understanding about the work that we do. And many of them don't have that knowledge because they don't have regular interactions with our philanthropy team. They don't get regular updates on what we're doing. If you think about the reports and the other things that most people see in shelters, it's about number of adoptions, it's about live outcomes, it's about a whole host of things other than this is the success that we're having philanthropically. So these are some of the assumptions that we have. Also, a lot of times the philanthropy team is just kind of operating on an island. They are siloed. We want to bring that to a close. So we have a poll that we're about to put up that has 3 very simple questions. What I'm going to ask is that folks answer those questions quickly, because we do have a lot to get through, but this is going to help us get to know a little bit more about the folks that we have on our call today. So Rory's going to bring this poll up at some point, and we're going to get to polling. Here we go. Everyone's got 20 seconds to answer these questions. I'm just going to do some fill while everyone works on this, because who likes awkward silence? Not me. I'll just speak for myself and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your knowledge of your fundraising programs? I will also note to the panelists, we should not be filling this out. We don't want to skew our results. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you enjoy asking your friends and family for money to support your organization? And what is the size of your philanthropic operations? Would you call it large, small, or we just don't even have any? All right, Rory, I'm going to say, I think we've given everyone 20 seconds to answer this. If you want to pull up our results, we can take a quick look at that and see if everybody passed this very difficult quiz. All right, on a scale of 1 to 10, knowledge. Most folks coming in pretty strong knowledge. It's fantastic. Maybe I can turn this presentation over to the 11% that said 9. So what this tells me is we likely have a fair number of people who are actually on the fundraising team that are on this call, perhaps a little bit less of folks on the ops side of the equation. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you enjoy asking your friends and family to support your organization? On this, it looks a little bit different because we've got a solid, let's go 5 and less is a low score on that. And we've got probably about 60, 65% are going to say, you know, I really don't enjoy that. Wow, we've got a solid 16% or so that say, I really dig that. I'm down with it. So that's fantastic. And then when we look at the size of the organizations that we have on today's call, about half more than half are either small or have no fundraising operation, 40% medium and large. So super useful to be able to have that. Again, I think in doing this, I want to be clear, no matter what size your operation is, there's going to be something for you today. So when we think about creating this culture, what is philanthropy? Who is a philanthropist, and what is a culture of philanthropy? I'm not going to dive into this in any great detail. You all, judging from these results, have a solid sense about what philanthropy is. What I want to do is talk about who is a philanthropist for 1 second, which is every single person who walks in the door of your shelter, and getting our entire team, our entire staff to understand that every single person that comes in the door can be a philanthropist for our organization is what building a culture of philanthropy is about. That culture of philanthropy we're going to define in greater detail as we move throughout this, but essentially it's about getting the entire organization engaged in the process of philanthropy and behind those efforts. So it does not sit as an outside operation. It is ingrained truly in everything that we do in building our programs. And to me, a lot of this is built around this recognition that everyone can be a philanthropist, whether that's $1 donor or $1 million donor. What does our philanthropy team do? Well, we've got this fantastic graphic here about what people think that fundraising is, what our philanthropy team does. I'll allow you all to look at that. I think my favorite is sort of what my mom thinks I do, and that's perhaps because my mom actually said this to me, that she's like, well, how successful has your begging for money been lately? And I thought, well, Mom, that's a really wonderful way to speak to your son and really lift them up. So maybe my grandma would think in that angel form, but it was a little bit different. And that really illustrated to me how much people don't know about what we do. Because at the heart of the matter, and when we think about how we create a culture of philanthropy, what we're trying to do are these other things. We educate, we inspire, and we engage. We do that to our staff, to our entire community, to our adopters, to our social media followers, to everyone. Our teams are by and large the storytellers, the raconteurs, the one that engage our community about what we do, because we are looking to create a connection with them to our mission that will allow us to do more for animals and the people who love them. And all of this is built around not a short-term, but a long-term perspective, that what we're after are partners and investors and people that will build a lasting relationship with us. And I'm going to use a lot of language like this about partners and connection and other things as we go through this, because I think it's important that while this slide says fundraising on it, I try and use that term really very, very rarely, and to use the term philanthropy instead, because I think the words that we use are incredibly important. One of the other things about making this journey to really creating the culture of philanthropy that we all want is recognizing that it is hard. If it was easy, truly, everyone would do it. And who doesn't like a quote from A League of Their Own? That's where, you pull any movie that Madonna was in that you can pull quotes from. That's a winning day for sure. But if we had more time, if we were doing this in person, it would be easier to get a sense of where are the individual organizations that we have in terms of where do you think you are in creating the culture of philanthropy and creating this environment that your entire organization is bought into the idea that philanthropy is an essential element to the success of the organization. They're actively engaged in that work and supportive of it. And we're all going to be in different places as we enter that journey. One of the things that I put up, it's sort of tongue in cheek, but I think there's some truth to it, is getting everybody to understand philanthropy is not another F word. There are a lot of positive words that we can have around philanthropy. And when we think about this philanthropy versus fundraising, what we're trying to get people to understand is when we talk about philanthropists, how does it feel when you give money to a cause that you care about? If you give money to an animal shelter, if you give money to a homeless shelter, to whatever it is that's one of your philanthropic passions, when you do that, do you feel like I had a terrible day and I just helped something terrible happen? No, just like when our donors give to us, they feel positively about it. What our jobs are to do, and everyone in the organization, is to reinforce that feeling, to give them a dopamine hit every single time they support our cause, that we can tell them they are partnering with us to change the world. And it's not just our job to do that, but to try and get the entire organization engaged in that effort. Because when we flip to the other side of fundraising, when you're just asking for money, most people don't enjoy that. While some of the folks on this said, I do like it. To me, what we're thinking about is a little bit of a different thing. I don't think anyone really likes asking for money. What we like doing is allowing people an opportunity to invest in our mission, to partner with us in seeing the change that we want to accomplish in the world, because not one single person can do it alone. We need the collective input and buy-in of our community and our entire teams. That's what this is about. It's about all of these positive words about what philanthropy is. It's about compassion. It's about humanity, benevolence. It's about a host of things, but it is not about fundraising. I think the more that we can move our teams away from using those words, the better we can be. So why does this building a culture of philanthropy matter? And we have this car up here that's very much the car that I envision that Bobby Mann drives. And I think if anything less than that, I couldn't get away with that car, but I know that Bobby could. That's not the only reason I have it up. It's because when we think about what our organizations hope to achieve in this world, many of us have some pretty grand ambitions. Certainly the HASS model for fundraising absolutely does. And when we look at this, if you want a Porsche in your life, if you want a Lamborghini, I don't care what it is, you have to actually have the resources to be able to get that. So we have a lot of broad ambitions in animal welfare. We will never be able to achieve those unless we have the philanthropic support to be able to do that. Us building a culture of philanthropy is an essential element in allowing that to happen. If we just continue to do the exact same things that we've been doing, we will not see different results, certainly not outside of what we could do. We have to challenge ourselves every day to build this culture, to build our programs, and to look at things like this. Do we have the staffing that we need for the programs? Do we have even the programs that we want? Do we have the technology to implement these? Are our facilities adequate? Not just adequate, are they extraordinary? Do you have endowments set up that can help support your organization through harder times? This is what philanthropy can drive for all of us. I imagine if we had a poll to say how many of your organizations are overfunded, or how many of you have all of the resources you need to do everything that you want, that probably no one would say that I have that. If you are in that situation, then please put it in the chat, let us know, and you will have an awful lot of people. They're going to want to contact you and say, where on earth do you work? Because I want a job there, and how on earth did you get there? But as we think about creating this culture, it's really about taking a look at these needs, thinking about what are the strategic priorities of our organization, and what role does philanthropy have in helping us to achieve those goals? What does it mean for us if we can raise 10% more, 20% more? What does that actually allow us to do? Because we know a couple of things, and this is also important for people to understand, because it comes back to that idea that people don't like asking for money, which again is an assumption that I have, and understanding that this group is by and large made up of fundraisers. If we took this to our animal care staff, if we took this to our adoptions counselors, if we took it to our veterinary team, I think their answers would be very different. They might say, I like asking for money about as much as I like doing public speaking. And perhaps if I put that in with the other things that people fear, it might be like being in the ocean at night alone, far from shore, and then having to do public speaking and somehow raise money. What we know is the actual opposite of that. The folks that support us love us. They like to give. It makes them feel good. In fact, most people do give by the nature of what we see on tax returns. Most people make philanthropic contributions. So most people are involved in this. We also know that donors cannot accomplish what they want without our organization. We are the catalyst for change that they want. So we need to engage them, involve them in that work. We need to be able to demonstrate how we are making an impact, and to recognize what I pointed out earlier, that every single person that walks in our door can be a philanthropist, can be a supporter of our organization. It is our job to educate, inspire, and engage them throughout every contact that we have, and make that happen. Smooth that path out so that we can get there. It's also important to absolutely understand, for the people that do support our work, they are not supporting us just to meet our needs. So when we say we need blankets, we need something, whatever it might be, we need vaccines, we need more staff. What we want to do is talk about what they want to do is help us solve problems. They want us to solve problems. They're not supporting our work because we have needs. They're supporting our work because we are the solution providers. We're the ones that save animals and do these things. So what I want to challenge everyone to do is think about how equipped your teams are to speak in these terms. not to talk about needs, but to talk about impact, to talk about what their support does, what their investment, what their partnership in your organization does. So shifting again from a philanthropic or from a fundraising mindset to a philanthropic mindset and getting everybody in the organization bought into that concept. Incredibly important. It's also important to recognize that when we talk about this culture, that culture, again, it's not easy. It's going to take time, it's learned, and everyone's going to be in a different starting place. One of the things that we created at San Diego Humane Society is it's about as exciting a name as our philanthropy working group, but one of the things I'm certainly not good at is coming up with jazzy names for things. But we created a campus fundraising initiative, which is a program where our adoption counselors ask our adopters for a donation at the time of the adoption. And so if we looked 4 years ago, we were making no money because we didn't have that program. Now for us, we make in a non-pandemic year over $200,000 a year on donations that are made at the time of adoption. But it's not just about that. It's about how we work with our adoptions counselors to speak with our adopters, to help lay the groundwork, to build a relationship with them, that this doesn't end when they walk out the door with their dog, their cat, their bunny, their goat, their horse, whatever it might be. That we let them know that their support is a part of what allows us to be there for other animals. And then it creates what we hope will be a lifelong relationship that we have with those adopters that turns them into philanthropists to our organization, not just adopters. We have a very different dialogue with them after that fact. Because one of the things about this whole philanthropy thing that I think kind of blows a lot of people's minds is how much money is given away every single year. So to put this in context, $449 billion was given to charity in 2019. If you looked at the total revenues from Major League Baseball, it comes in at $10 billion. There's over $1 billion a day being given away in this country alone for individuals to see the change that they want in the world. But if we want to think about what's coming to animals in that, we have to come down all the way to the bottom here. That 3% goes to environment and animals. And it's been 3% for an incredibly long period of time. And based on a number of different things I've done, I'm going to contend that 1% of the philanthropy that's given away annually is coming to animals and animal-related causes. Some of you have heard me say this before. It, I believe, should be all of our goals through creating cultures of philanthropy, through demonstrating impact, showing the impact that we can make, that we can take a larger piece of this pie and get that to 2%. Because if we could get it to 2%, we would be able to address unquestionably many more of the root causes that cause animals to end up being homeless. So we did see an increase in giving to environment and animal organizations, pretty significant increases, not just in 2019, but in 2020 alone. If we keep that trend going, maybe we can get to that 2%. And that's really what this food for thought is. Imagine what we can do if we can do that. The questions we have to ask ourselves are, what are the changes that we need to make to better engage with our community? To articulate to them that, the work that they think we do, which is by and large for almost all shelters, they think that, well, we just find homes for homeless dogs and cats, which is a laudable and worthy cause. But we know that many of us do so much more than that, particularly as we look at implementing the whole human animal support services model of integrating with human service agencies, with One Health models, with social safety net services. We have so many opportunities to expand our range of supporters and the impact that we can make through that, and to significantly alter our trajectory because we have greater philanthropic support to do that. So in this what if scenario, what I'd really like to do is to be able to focus on what would your organization be able to do if your philanthropic revenue grew by 20%, by 30%, by 50%. Because these are the types of things when you're going out and you're talking to your supporters and your donors, these are the things that what we want to be able to do is educate folks and create a case for support about why, if you're a $10 donor, what could we do if they became a $12 donor? For a $100 donor, they move to $120, $1,000 donor, $1,200. All of our donors, generally speaking, have the ability to do that. What we need to do is to be able to motivate them so that animal welfare can, generally speaking, move up the philanthropic priority list because we're demonstrating the impact that we're making on all of these other issues that folks are not recognizing that we do. I'm going to tell a super quick story here. It's a really big donor, but it's illustrative of what happens across the board when we can truly educate people about what we do. San Diego Humane Society had a donor that for several years had given $100,000, which is a massive amount of money. And I totally recognize that there are going to be some folks maybe in rural communities who are going to say, we don't even have anybody that could give that. Whether it's 5, 10, 100, the story is the same and the rationale behind it is the same. This donor gave us $100,000 a year because they thought we found homes for dogs and cats, and they thought that was great, and they wanted to support us in a significant way. They came to one event. After that event, we worked to engage them. They were largely quiet. We got a check 2 months after that event for $1.2 million. For the last 4 years, they've given between $1.2 and $1.5 million annually. And when we followed up and said, what was the reason for this increase? She said, I never fully knew what you did. And now that I do, I'm giving you essentially all of my philanthropy, and it comes to you. That's the type of change that we can make by educating, inspiring, and engaging our communities about the work that we do. So, thinking about this, what can we do to improve our culture? Again, I recognize that we're all in different stages, but there's no question. And there's no question that we can all do more. So one of the challenges that I want to make in this presentation, because I do feel like just showing up at a presentation is great. And we're going to have a couple of things at the end of this where we're going to invite you to be a part of our philanthropy working group. But what I want to do is task everyone, whether it's after this presentation or tomorrow, to truly sit down and ask yourself the question, ask your teams the question, what's holding us back from creating the culture that we want? What's getting in the way of that? What can we move? And what can we do? Because we recognize that this is as essential to our future growth, to our operation, as it is us sitting down and talking about how do we want to do more community spay neuters, more free low-cost spay neuters? How do we generate the money to do that? And I would contend that in animal shelters regularly, a significant amount of time is spent thinking about programmatic growth, and not nearly as much time is spent on the corresponding side of how are we going to raise the revenue to be able to get that. So that is just something that I put out as food for thought for you all. When we come back and we think about building our culture, I touched on this a little bit more before, but I want to make sure that I reiterate this because it's really, I think this lies as the central part of this. And I do, in non-COVID times, I do a presentation for every new hire that we have at San Diego Humane Society. And we talk about our culture of philanthropy. And I look every single person we have in the eye and I say, my job is not about asking for money, and nobody's is here. What we're doing is creating an opportunity truly for like-minded individuals in our community to partner with us to make the change that we want. And that I absolutely hold true. And to me, that's something that everyone can do. And we have a score of ways that we work to be able to do that at San Diego Humane Society. But what we first have to do is get our team to understand that that's not what this is about. What we are asking everyone in our organization to do, our staff, our volunteers, our supporters, is to share their passion. And when they share their passion in an authentic way and they create real connections with people, that's where we're going to see transformational giving, transformational changes in folks' philanthropic investment in us. So it's essential to be able to do that. One of the other things in sort of thinking about how we approach this culture aspect and how we build it is there might be some folks saying, well, we have an organizational culture. Now you're talking about this culture of philanthropy. I just want to cover quickly. Every organization has multiple cultures. There's an organizational culture at San Diego Humane Society. Then for my team, there's my own team culture. Then each of my different departments heads has their own subculture beneath that. So we have to acknowledge that multiple cultures exist. We have two sort of named other cultures at San Diego Humane Society. One is our culture of care, which is about how we work to take care of our staff, and we can name it. And I think naming these things is important. We also have a culture of philanthropy, which is about how everyone plays a part in our philanthropic efforts. Everyone, no matter what role they are in, plays a part. And we'll sort of touch on that a little bit more, but I want to make sure just to be able to address that. Because what we're trying to do is to get to kind of these four components in our culture, that there is an accepted and a shared responsibility for philanthropy, that philanthropy is integrated and totally connected and aligned with the mission. It isn't that there's just a mission and we're talking about everything that we want to do without any idea about how we're actually going to build the philanthropic capacity to be able to do that. San Diego Humane Society, if we look at the trajectory of this organization over the last 10 years, the growth has absolutely been explosive. And for the first couple of years in that growth, the organization was expanding wildly without investments in the philanthropic infrastructure to be able to help support that growth. And that's something that I think happens regularly in nonprofits like animal welfare, is taking a look at that. So as you're looking at that growth, this is another bit that I want to put out to everyone, is thinking about what are not just the investments that we need to make on the program side, but what do we need to invest in the philanthropy side of the equation that's going to allow us to fuel that growth and do it in a sustainable manner. Points 3 and 4 on here are really about how we're building relationships. That fundraising is not about asking for money. It's about truly engaging our public, our adopters, just anyone who has a passion for animals in our community, to build long-lasting relationships that make them want to be a part of what we do. So in taking a look at this and the shared responsibility, everyone in our organization has a responsibility to help us educate, inspire, and engage every single person that comes in our door. So how does that happen? There are a couple things about this. Number one, I also want to recognize every single person that enters the doors of our shelter, that visits our shelter online, that comes to one of our events, is judging us. They're judging our professionalism. They're judging our competence. They may not know it, but they are. So when they walk away from their adoption experience, the questions that are going to actually be there are, well, is this an organization that I would want to be a part of? Do I want to support them? They see that because what they see are people exceeding their expectations, which is a goal that we set, to say we want everyone in every interaction we have as best we can to exceed our guests' expectations. What that allows them to see is, you know what, when they get a direct mail appeal from us in the future, when they see our emails, maybe they want to sign up and follow us on social media because they think that organization is filled with people that are doing amazing, life-changing work. So a couple of other things that we do at San Diego Humane Society. Everyone who comes here has their participation in our culture of philanthropy in their job description. Every single staff member has that. We want to always view the organization from the eyes of the public, which was really what I was just talking about, that we are consistently being judged and people want to look to say, do they have truly the shared commitment? If people come into our shelters and they see that we're not providing great animal care, that people don't look like they're enjoying their jobs, that's not the type of organization that most folks want to support. I realize people might say, oh, well, maybe they'll support that because they see a need. Again, what people want to invest in are organizations that are making impact. And that's what we want to be able to demonstrate, to be able to move from smaller contributions to larger contributions and getting more people engaged and involved. What we want to do is ensure that our staff is not just doing okay work, not just doing great work, that they're doing amazing work, and that they are sharing those stories with us so that we can get that information out to the public. Without sharing our stories, we can't build those connections. So whether you're on the philanthropy team, whether you're outside of the philanthropy team, this is another kind of takeaway from today. My challenge would be not tomorrow, not next week necessarily, but in the very near future. If you're not already doing this, to sit down with your philanthropy team and talk about what are the key accomplishments that your team has had? What are your top priorities for the future? What could you achieve with additional philanthropy? Getting the strategic priorities for all of the programs aligned and making sure that the philanthropic team is actually aware of all of these is extraordinarily important. Making sure that those meetings happen regularly, not haphazardly, that they're happening all the time. That's going to allow you to have your program staff, your philanthropy team connected and integrated in more than just a passing way. We do things in recognizing, and San Diego Humane Society admittedly is a huge shelter by shelter standards. We have over 550 employees. We have 5 different campuses, and we have a lot of staff that wouldn't necessarily come into contact with each other. And I'm certainly referencing, generally speaking, in a non-COVID world, what we'll do is do team meet and greets with our philanthropy team to go meet with the medical team, to go meet with our humane law enforcement teams, so that everyone can actually know who the players are on this. Because what we want to do is connect that dot between our philanthropic team and our programmatic teams. So they share that information with us. They know who we are as people. They know that we share their passion. We're not just people that are getting paid to go have parties and talk to people that drive Lamborghinis. That's not what we do. We're very far from that. What we want to do, again, is share our passion, their impact, and their stories. So when we view philanthropy as engagement, we can do things like this. So this couple here, this looks to me like a young Boris Johnson who just adopted a cat. And so young Boris Johnson and his family who just adopted this cat. When we work with them effectively through the adoption process with a culture of philanthropy that's ingrained, when this couple leaves, what they know is not just that they worked with someone who was passionate about getting them connected with an animal that they're going to share their life with for the entirety of that life of that animal, but they have a community of supporters in that organization that are going to follow up with them and check in on how their cat's doing, that spoke to them and educated them about what it is that actually allows the organization to do what it does, not just for that cat, but for every animal that comes in. So that when they leave, they didn't just leave with more knowledge about, Trixie the cat here that they just adopted. They left knowing more about San Diego Humane Society, Washington Animal Rescue League, Oregon Humane, pick it, whichever organization it is, large or small, because these are our philanthropists. These are our supporters. One of the things that we also want, for us in San Diego, we combined our philanthropy, our marketing, and communications efforts. We call our department FOMS. You could call it Philations. You could call it Marthropy. You could call it whatever you want. But I'm going to go ahead and voice a strong position that combining those operations is really, I'll call it the best way to ensure that all of the communications are combined around prioritizing philanthropy in light of all of the other pressures that the marketing and communications team needs to do. So when we look at philanthropy as engagement, these are just a couple of the things that can come from that. So recognizing this, I want to just do a couple of things because this culture, and I want to be really clear that this is a long and it's an ongoing process. I think that we have a lot of great things in place at my organization and at many of the other organizations that are on this call, but it's not perfect. Not everybody is always there every day doing exactly sort of the things that we want to build that culture. It's an ongoing process. I think in animal welfare, we have unbelievably complicated work that can be stressful. We know about compassion fatigue. We know about all of these things. What I hope we can recognize, even as we embark on creating this culture of philanthropy that we want, there are going to be some harder days. We might meet with program staff that basically say, I'm never going to do this. I hate it. The thought of talking to people about money makes me sick to my stomach. I hate what you all do. I imagine if you all are like me, you've had people, many people probably tell you, if you tell them what you do, they say, oh God, I would hate that job. That's terrible. I could never ask for money. And then I have to go through this whole shtick that I've just gone through with you all, that's not at all the way I view my job, that I love my job because we get to connect people's passions with their resources in a way that's really very rare and pretty extraordinary. So our work is never done. And when we think about how we need to fix these problems and to create this culture that we want, recognize, and by the way, this quote is not attributed to any great thought leader, because it's just kind of a concept that I came up with on this one, of nearly every problem is due to a failure in communication or leadership. So if we look and we could say, we don't have the culture for our organization, we don't have the culture of philanthropy that we want, wherever that might be, most of the problems that have allowed that to happen are either failures in communication or in leadership. And one of the groups that we're going to spend just a couple of moments talking about here that we need to create some of those connections with are boards. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie to talk about how teams can work to unleash some energy from your board. But I'm going to go ahead and contend that everything that Stephanie says here can be applied to not just board members, but how we educate our entire team to talk to the public. So Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brian. I mean, one of the things that I want everybody to realize is that, again, agreeing with Brian, is that we're not asking for money as fundraisers. What we're doing is that we're telling stories. So what I want to try to let everyone know is that they can actually unleash sort of the energy and commitment from board members and teach them in a way to tell those stories. Because oddly enough, a lot of board members don't really know what to say when they have the opportunity to talk about why they sit on the board. And it's our job to help them get that story. And when you see a board member see their passion and find their story, it's actually really quite exciting to be with them when they start talking to somebody about what they do. So one of the simple things that you can do is just ask a very simple question to your board. Why do you care? Have them ask themselves, why do I care about this cause? And one thing you have to remember is that your board member joined your board not because they wanted to say, I want to fundraise for you, but they really truly believed in the cause and the work that you're doing. And many board members have very deeply personal reasons for caring. Maybe they have a passion for a cat that brought them through difficult times, or a dog that supported them while they were children. But what you have to do is try to unleash that story. And a very easy way to do that is you can ask board members to just kind of write a brief personal testimony about why they are committed to your agency. And sometimes it's nice to put that little blurb possibly on the website, on your board page, or you could put those quotes in any of your marketing materials. But it's great to be able to have them have and readjust and recommit themselves to why they joined your cause in the first place. And oddly enough, their story will probably inspire someone else's as well. Another thing that you can ask your board is, why would someone contribute to the organization? And that can be as simple as just having them brainstorm 3 to 5 reasons why maybe someone should contribute to your organization. And then when they discuss this among themselves, it's great to sort of hear what they believe is important in the cause and why it deserves support. And sometimes they'll ignite in the staff, oh, I never really thought about that as a reason as to why someone would donate. And then another thing is to create a very simple story about a real person or an animal or program, something that was impacted by your nonprofit. And this isn't really a sales pitch. It's not your elevator speech. It's really just a story that can be told. And a very simple 3-part story is very much like any movie or book or television show we're watching. You start your story with a situation. So for example, there was this dog or family or cat or whatever that may be. So your situation, there was a dog who came into our shelter who, fill in the blank, and then you have your drama or your crisis. Then this happened, and then you have your happy ending. And we were able to help them in this way. So it's a very simple, every sort of story has it. You have your situation, you have your drama and your crisis, and then you have your happy ending. And that's a very simple way for your board members to understand, wow, it's more than just money that we're raising, that we're asking for. We are actually helping individuals, helping animals in a crisis, and we brought about a happy ending. And so then at that point, you're talking about actions, you're talking about powerful issues that you're solving, you're talking about animals that you're helping. It's not just a matter of, we need money for this. So you can also, well, those stories can then turn into, what are we raising money for? And what I often do with board members is that when we were all meeting in person, we would put questions in a hat, and then we would have the board members pull out those questions. We would have a couple of staff members in the front of the board meeting, and they would answer those questions, almost like it was a little interview. It can happen as well also virtually, just by telling the board members in advance what you'd like them to ask. But they can be as simple as questions as, what is going on at our organization? What are the biggest challenges that we're facing right now? How much does it actually cost to help one animal, one family? How many animals are we actually helping? Why does the work cost so much, and where does the money go? Why is our work so urgent? What is at stake? Why do we even need private contributions? What else does this program really need? What would we do if we had an additional 500K? So it's kind of interesting, once again, to take the conversation away from money and actually make it about something. What is it that you're doing? Who are we helping? And then by having the board ask those questions of the staff members, they can also get a better understanding from the staff as to what actually is happening in that in your organization. And then there's always that wonderful of just looking at the vision and the possibility of asking each board member, what would happen if? Wouldn't it be wonderful if? And then at that point, you can ask each board member to sort of share their idea of what wonderful things could happen if your organization continues to be successful doing its amazing work. And then when the board members share their vision about what the organization could possibly accomplish, then they are kind of reigniting their own passion as they speak. You can see their eyes start to shine, and then they want to be able to get that story again. So very quickly, but again, that bottom line is that we all have a story to tell. So it's just our job to make sure that we give those board members something to say, and we help them build those stories, and then we help them become those personal advocates for our cause of philanthropy. Brian?
Fantastic. Thank you, Stephanie. And as I said, I think a lot of those can work really well in how we communicate and talk to our staffs as well. But boards certainly sit as a singular kind of challenge for some of us. I do like this quote that I'll just put in here, just for good measure, that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place to begin with. So this is another thing of just thinking about truly, how clear have your communications been to your team about what your goals are with philanthropy, how they can be involved, and thinking about how you can work on that. So as you think about that, and I want to cover these two slides kind of quickly, and there's another call on Friday that for the folks that participate in that leadership call, we're going to dig more into really leadership's role in communications, about knowing how to talk to donors. But I'll go ahead and put it out there that how we communicate with donors is a very unique group. Most folks that don't work on the philanthropy team have never been trained in how to actually talk to donors, that kind of don't recognize how we need to work that they're a different audience than pretty much everybody else that we deal with. It's not a typical conversation. What's our role with them? Thank them. Invite them to learn more about our work. Smile. Demonstrate that we have a passion for animals. So when program staff are dealing with people, whether this is in an event, whether it's seeing people on a donor tour, or any one of the number of ways that folks could do that, getting our teams to recognize how to do that is incredibly important. The only way they're going to be able to do that, generally speaking, is if the philanthropy team reaches out proactively and creates tools to be able to do that. An example of that is we at San Diego Humane Society have met with all of the leaders of our different program areas to talk to them about what our expectations are for when we're giving donor tours, because we give a lot of donor tours here, and how they can properly engage, how we want them to work with the donors that they see, how we want them to engage with us. And it also lets them know that we recognize that we're bringing donor tours into our veterinary hospital. We're bringing veterinary tours into our behavior center, our kitten nursery, all of our operations. What are the things that they want from us as well? Because we know they need to do their jobs. We're not looking to get in the way of that, but what we're looking to do is to be able to have people that leave this shelter saying, every person that I saw blew me away with their commitment to their job, they were able to see that passion in ways that are both verbal and nonverbal. And that's what we want to be able to do. That is not going to happen unless there is some work that goes in to creating that environment and making it happen. So some of the other ways that we can make that happen is to ensure that the philanthropy team is meeting with your medical team, meeting with all of the teams that you have to talk about what are maybe the top 3 to 5 accomplishments that they achieved last year. We want to be able to share those with people again to demonstrate our impact. What are your top priorities for the coming year? And what do we need to actually reach those goals, to hit those priorities? If money were no object, what would you do to change your program? Because maybe we can go talk to a funder or funders or just collectively raise more if we can show that vision, if we can communicate that effectively to the people that can help bring this to life. And then exploring what are the ways that the philanthropy team can partner with their program, whether that's just getting to know the teams a little bit better. We have philanthropy or FOMS team members that sit in on different operational team meetings so that we can be aware of what's taking place in those parts of the organization, so that we can do a better job in communicating that out to the public, telling the stories that, again, change the perception that the public has and make them want to be a part of what we do. Just a couple of quick ideas to be able to do that. If you're in a leadership position that is outside of philanthropy, what I want to challenge you to do is to go talk to your philanthropy team about all of these things. Be proactive in that. Ask what you and your team can do to build this culture, to build a real connection and a partnership with philanthropy because you're all combined and committed to making sure that the organization can raise more money. For leadership, be visible and active at the events that you have. Again, this is something we'll talk more about on Friday, but thinking about how to be able to do that. How can you be engaged in donor stewardship? Asking even for feedback from the philanthropy team. If you attended an event, here's a simple example. Is there anything else you would have liked for me to done at the event? And the philanthropy team should be talking to you about how you can actually engage with donors at those events and just overall be responsive. Not a ton of time to dig into this. It's a huge topic and it's a hugely important one, but I did want to touch on it here because what we're looking to ensure is that we are not producing mediocre results when we're dealing with our donors. What we're expecting, no matter what they're investing in our organization, and even in getting people that aren't donors now, what we need to demonstrate, I said it at the start, I'm going to reiterate it here, is that we're demonstrating excellence. We're demonstrating vision. We're showing that we know how to achieve results that we have set out to achieve. So how are we communicating the successes that we've had? And how are we also communicating that bright vision to the future? This is where, to me, that combination of philanthropy and marketing and communications really also makes the most sense, so that the entire sort of communication spectrum is within one department. There aren't competing needs. There aren't folks creating unnecessary friction that keeps that from happening. Because what we need to do is essentially unlock the excellence that's in the organization, tell those stories, and invite our communities to join us in making that change. So this will be one of the challenges that I want to leave people with. What can you do to build that culture of philanthropy at your organization? You all know where you are in this journey. I hope that today's presentation has made you want to push a little further in that effort. I hope that it's given you a couple of ideas on how to be able to do that. But I want everyone to just take a little bit of thought on what can you do to build it? What's the relationship that you want with your team? And here are a couple of examples of ways to be able to do that, to help bring this culture to life. These are just some examples that we do for some of the organizations that are on the philanthropy working group. Sending out quarterly communications from your executive director, president, CEO that touch on philanthropy and its importance. Easy way to be able to again, communicate at the highest level. This is something we're all engaged in. I touched on the campus fundraising initiative already, which is the process of working with adoptions counselors to not just have them say, do you want to make a gift when you make an adoption, but working with them to do that educate, inspire, and engage portion throughout the adoption process. Sharing philanthropy stats at campus meetings and not just focusing on what are the animal related stats, but how are we doing philanthropically to actually meet our goals and fuel our growth coming up. Having those philanthropy team meet and greets that I already talked about, ensuring that your philanthropy team knows your other programmatic staff, that there are real relationships there. Looking at how the information actually comes to the FOMS team, setting up mechanisms to do that. Making sure, again, staff are trained in how to work with donors, staff are integrated into donor stewardship, include your culture of philanthropy in your new hire orientation, include them in your job descriptions. So how can you get some even more materials on all of this? Well, it's in the HASS Philanthropy Toolkit. So the HASS Philanthropy Toolkit is about, 50 pages of philanthropy information that does a lot that we didn't do here today. There are modules on direct mail. There are modules on social media. There are modules on planned giving. So we've got the link to the toolkit, I believe, is already in the chat, and maybe we could drop it in again, just in case anybody arrived late, doesn't want to go back and find that link. There are a lot of resources that the Philanthropy Working Group put a lot of time in creating, so that everybody can recognize we're not looking to recreate the wheel everywhere. We can, in fact, learn from each other. We should, and we should share that knowledge. The other thing is the HASS Job Alike link. So this is something that we invite everyone, no matter the size of your shop, whatever role you're in. There are going to be 2 meetings a month for the HASS Job Alike group that's going to go, and we're going to talk about all things philanthropy, not just culture of philanthropy. We can dig into all of the issues. And what we're really looking to do is to create a community here of people that want to engage and be involved in having those discussions. We're all out to do the same thing. We're all out to make the world better for animals. We are out, quite literally, to change the world. So coming back to it, there's no way that doing mediocre things can be okay. There's no way that doing the same things that we've done before and expecting a different result is going to allow us to achieve the kinds of changes that we want to make through the HASS movement and through just the individual work that all of the shelters out there on this call are doing. So let's be ambitious. Let's be amazing. Let's get out there and change the world and unlock the philanthropy that's actually going to allow us to do that. So that brings to a close our presentation with a full solid 3 minutes. 3 minutes to go to take any questions, of which I have no idea if there are any questions that came in chat or any others. So Ashlee.
Brian, actually, we have a question for each member of the panel. So Pam, I'm going to start with you and ask for a 30-second response. We had a question come in about corporate sponsorship, specifically as we talk about a culture of philanthropy. How does that make a difference for corporate partnerships? Or why would that be important to our corporate partners?
You know, you use the same types of ideas that have been communicated. We need to communicate with them. We need to tell our stories. We need to show them how our missions are alike. And that's a real key. Know your corporation that you're working with, know what they want to accomplish, and then show them how you're doing that. Show them how they can be, a term that Brian used, a catalyst to make a change in the world. Absolutely.
Pam, well said. Perfect. Brian, one question that we had come in was earlier in the presentation, you talked about that your adoptions team is currently helping to raise funds by asking adopters. Is there a set amount that they're sharing or requesting, or is that just something they're sharing the story overall and people are giving from that story?
Yeah, it's a magic. It's a little bit of all things, actually. So we've gone through a lot of iterations on that, of recognizing we could have a set amount and we could say, you know, $50 can do this. And we've actually, so we have tools that we've given them of these are different dollar amounts that go, if you gave $10, it pays for this kind of vaccine. If you did this amount, it pays for a spay-neuter surgery. What we've worked with our teams on is to basically say, we do not have a prescriptive amount. What we do is say, we're going to basically give this to you, that whatever your comfort level is with the interaction that you've had, pick it. And to be able to say, you know, what we do is, in closing this, it's basically saying, you know, one of the roles that we have, we've talked about this, is to allow each of our adopters with an opportunity to make an additional contribution beyond the adoption amount that allows us to save animals like, you know, Sherman here. And, you know, I'd love to invite you to be able to do that. You know, a lot of folks have decided they'd love to be able to sponsor a spay-neuter surgery. Each of our spay-neuter surgeries costs $49. If that's something you'd be comfortable with, would you be able to do that? No. Then they can say, you know, is there any amount that you'd like to be able to do? And we can make it really quick, but it gives them an opportunity. Sometimes you can throw it out there with something and they can kind of pick something that really fits that bill for them. And I think the largest contribution that we've had come in from our adoptions is $1,000.
Wow.
So
great.
We've had some great success with that.
Fantastic. And Stephanie, to bring us on home, we had a question. In talking to your boards, what is the one question that everybody should turn around and ask their board of directors after this presentation?
Why are you on our board? Just, I mean, very, very simple. And it does kind of flesh out, which could be a whole other presentation. There are some board members that, you know, are just on a board because they want to pad their resume. And once they get there, they realize that they really need to do some work. But that is our job as staff and as volunteers to really flesh out, why are you here? How can I support you? What are you passionate about? But, you know, as simple, why are you here? And let me help you.
Perfect. Thank you all. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Pam. You guys are rock stars. We're so excited and so lucky to have your expertise today. Thank you. Rory, I'm going to kick it back to you to close.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic and just so much important and amazing information. This will be recorded and shared out. And I appreciate especially our panelists tonight and everybody joining us this evening. So thanks again and have a wonderful evening.
Bye, everyone.